So now we're going to start talking about fetching and pulling. So I'm going to start with a hypothetical. Here's some diagrams. Once again, we have a local repository, and then we have a corresponding GitHub repo. And currently, let's say I just clone down the local repo. I'm entirely up to date with whatever is on GitHub, right? I have the master branch pointer and origin master, both referring to this latest commit. But I go on to do some more work, and as we saw previously, they now have diverged. I have a commit that the GitHub repo, the origin repo, does not have. But I'm also working with some collaborators. And in the meantime, while I was working on this yellow commit, whatever that is, those collaborators, let's just say one person, Bobhead, added 3 new commits that you can see up there in green. So those are on GitHub. They're on the master branch. Let's say there's just one branch. So the master branch, they're on GitHub. I don't have them locally. I do have my new commit, but I don't have those new commits coming from Bobhead. So how do I get those changes? This is where the 2 commands we're going to discuss, fetching and pulling, or git fetch, git pull, this is where they come into play. So here's a diagram that I've put together. It's based on some really common diagrams that you'll see where we have different locations. They're not really physical locations, but we've got our working directory, our workspace. We've got the staging area. We've got our actual local Git repository. So something like git add, hopefully by now we know, will stage changes, right? Git add will stage a change, puts it in the staging area, and then git commit takes whatever is in the staging area and then creates a new commit in the actual .git folder, the real local repository. And then we saw that git push will take commits from a local repo and push them up to a remote repo like GitHub, or a GitHub repo rather. So git fetch and git pull down here both go the other direction. There are 2 commands that we can use to get changes, new commits, from a remote repository, from GitHub in our example. So we're going to start with git fetch. Fetching is going to take remote changes, so stuff coming from a GitHub repo, and bring them down to the local repository, not into our working directory. So that is what git pull does. I will illustrate the difference. It can seem a little confusing at first. Fetching allows us to download changes from a remote repo, but those changes are not integrated into our working files. So it's a way of fetching the latest changes and having access to them on your machine, but without having to merge them into our actual local working directory, without having to mess up our files. So think of it as this last paragraph. Please go and get the latest information from GitHub, but don't screw up what I'm currently working on. So we'll have access to it using this git fetch command. So we specify git fetch and then a remote. The default is origin, so you could just do git fetch. But if you do git fetch origin, it's going to fetch from the origin. If you have multiple remotes, which eventually eventually in this course we will, it will fetch from whatever that remote is. Git will basically request origin and say, hey, origin, is there any changes on this GitHub repo? If so, I want them. We can also specifically just fetch one branch. So git fetch origin master or origin bug fix or whatever the branch is. So here's the same situation from before, right? We have this GitHub repo and a local repo. I'm working on it. I have a new commit in yellow. And then my friend, Bobhead, I think is what I said, added 3 commits to GitHub. He pushed them up. I don't have them. So if I don't want to screw up my local working directory, but I want access to those changes, I can fetch that branch, origin master, or I can just do git fetch and get everything from origin. And what will happen is that origin master, remember these remote branch references, that will update. So I have access, I can look at origin/master to see where is it, what's going on, what do the files look like, I can check it out, but my master branch has not changed in any way. That's exactly what this slide says. I got ahead of myself. I now have these changes on my machine, and if I want to see them, I can go check out origin/master, but my master branch is completely untouched. So basically, I've downloaded the changes, but I have not integrated them into my working directory, onto any branch that I'm working on. So if I lost internet, I would still have access to all of the work as of this moment in time that I fetched right? I don't need the internet to go look at this stuff. It's on my computer. It's just not in my working directory. So that's why in this diagram, we've got fetch going from the remote repository, fetching changes down to our local repo, but not into the workspace. So in the next video, I'm going to demonstrate this, but for now, all that you should know, or the recap really, the main takeaway is that fetching allows us to get changes from some remote repo without actually integrating those changes into our working files. So we can go take a look, see what changed, what's new on Origin or on any other remote, and we could specify if we only want to fetch one branch from a given remote. Otherwise, it's going to fetch all branches. So in the next video, I'm going to demonstrate this.